Trancing in the sheets. It's time for things to change.
Hi, my name's Kaz Riley. This is Trancing in the Sheets, and today we're talking about sexual integrity, whether or not you have it, how you find it, and what even is it. And today, to help us do that, we've got the author of this book, Sexual Integrity, Dr. Stephen Davidson, who's a sexologist based over in the US, who's written this amazing book. So welcome, Stephen. Thank you so much for coming on Trancing in the Sheets. It's really lovely to have you.
Hi, Kaz. Thank you for having me on your show.
So tell us, Stephen, I mean, sexual integrity, there's probably people thinking, well, what even is that? So tell us, what is sexual integrity?
Well, mine is not the first book with the title Sexual Integrity. There are other books out there with that phrase in the title, and many of them actually coach the reader toward a moralistic or kind of self-righteous opinion around sexuality. And my book does not do that. In 30 years of practice as a psychotherapist, working with individuals and couples, and more specifically in doing sex therapy, I've discovered that there's a common thread that runs through every sex therapy case that I see. And that is our difficulty with just letting our partners and even acknowledging to ourselves who we really are as sexual beings. So by sexual integrity, I mean to be transparent, to tell your truth, to walk your talk, to let your partners know you as you really are, and to lean in and own who you are as a sexual being, as opposed of repressing it or trying to deny it, hide it, compartmentalize it. That's what I mean by sexual integrity.
I think that's very true. I know I certainly see this, and I saw this in some of the kind of the first few chapters of your book, which is an amazing book, by the way. It's a really, truly insightful book, and I think it's just so easy to read. I think people really get what sexual integrity is as soon as they kind of turn the pages. But often we talk about having this kind of authenticity in life, don't we? And, you know, being our authentic selves, you know, we're often strive to being just who we are and to kind of go down that road of self-acceptance. And yet, even in those kinds of arenas, in that people are still taught quite often to compartmentalize their sexuality as if it's something that we kind of just switch on and switch off in certain situations, where it kind of rumbles through everyday life on every level, doesn't it? It's not that we're being sexual all the time, but our sexual integrity is part of who we are as people. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, I agree with you completely. And people think of sexuality more as an activity. It's something that you do, not something that you are. And I think our sexuality is also a reflection of our personality, how we express our gender, how we express our sexual orientation, how we think of ourselves in relationship to other people, how we love our partners, how we express affection. All of that is about sexuality. So I have to do a lot of education with clients to help them understand that we're not just talking about an activity that may happen a few times a week, hopefully more than that, sometimes not even that frequently, but we're talking about a broader aspect of who you are as a sexual being. And that does include our desires, our fantasies, those parts of ourselves that we are afraid to share even with our partners. So I work with couples that have been together for 10, 20, sometimes 30 years, and there are things that they've never shared with their partner about their sexuality, about their bodies, what they enjoy, what they don't enjoy. So they come in with all of these secrets, and and they are often surprised that I would encourage them to talk to each other about sex.
It's amazing, isn't it? You know, do you think that is partly the way kind of society has led people to believe that that's how they should behave? And also we've got this word, haven't we, that lurks around. I certainly lurks around just in just about every session I do with clients, and I suspect with you too. And that word, of course, is normal. And they want to be normal, or they fear that they're not normal, which often stops people expressing you know, those desires, those needs, and even how their own body works. Yeah, is that something that you see?
Yes, and I say in the book that as a therapist, I really don't like the word normal. It implies that, you know, there's one stagnant place on the spectrum that everyone should be. And normal exists on a very broad continuum. And so I do incorporate a lot of sex education, and when people feel brave enough to share a fantasy or to share something about how their body works, I will, if I can, quote some research. Well, you know what? That's really normal because 65% of people say this. And you know that your fantasy is a really common fantasy that we see in all cultures all over the world. So we are all a lot more normal around sexuality than we think we are, because we have been coached to not talk about it and to hold it in secrecy.
Absolutely. What do you think causes people to hold these things in secrecy and not talk about it? What would do you feel is the kind of biggest contributing factor, or the biggest block, if you like, to people accessing their sexual integrity?
I think religion is probably a huge barrier, regardless what your religious beliefs are. You know, religious documents have a lot of things to say about sexuality and really shame us for what we like, who we are, shame us for celebrating our bodies. So, very good people are trying to honor their faith, and they are not able to reconcile their faith and their sexuality at the same time. And that's why I think so many people compartmentalize their sexuality, and they can't integrate it into their whole life because they feel so much shame and embarrassment about it.
I mean, shame is such a powerful emotion, isn't it? You know, it tells us not I did something bad. It's even more than that. It's I am bad, isn't it? You know, that kind of sense of shame. What kinds of things have you know, that we talk about, that's kind of the cause of the block of people accessing their sexual integrity. If people aren't able to access their sexual integrity, what then happens to them? What are some of the things that can then occur because that shame is there, if you like, so people truly don't feel like they can be themselves?
Right. I think sexual integrity is really an evolution. It's not so much of a destination that you're there and then you're there forever. It's an ongoing process, and our sexuality evolves across our lifespan too. There are things that maybe we really enjoy later in life that we would have never considered earlier in life. Um, so you know, if we can't step into who we really are, it will limit our ability to have an intimate relationship with another person. One of the things that I say on my book is intimacy cannot exist where honesty will not be tolerated.
Hmm.
And if you are in a relationship, we generally want our partners to be honest with us. We want them to tell us the truth. But that also means we've got to be able to hear the truth. We've got to be able to listen to it and accept it. Because once we get the message that it's not okay to tell you the truth, we start backing up and shutting down. and then the relationship has reached its limit on how intimate it can be.
And, as humans, of course, the thing that we crave, that actually is really necessary for us to thrive is intimacy, not even necessarily sex. It's that connection, isn't it? And if we don't feel that we've got that trust connection, that honesty, that openness with somebody, then it's not just the sexual part of a relationship that begins to break down, is it? It's all the other aspects to it, because people kind of withdraw. Whereas if we're able to be fluid, if you like, with, as you say, our sexual integrity is a continual thing, because we learn, we grow, we want to have different experiences, our attitudes change. What we, if we look at how our attitudes of society change with regards to sex and sexuality in various settings, they're very different now. Now I'm heading towards my 50s and say they were when I was heading towards my 20s. It's a very different environment outside as well, isn't it? And do you think that helps people allows people to have permission, if you like, to explore themselves in a different way, so they can lose some of the shame perhaps and the blocks that they've had there in the past that have affected how they felt about their own kind of sexual integrity, if they were being authentic to themselves or not?
Yes, and I think that's one of the gifts of the internet, is that people have been able to educate themselves. They've been able to find other like-minded people. They've been able to identify aspects of who they are that maybe they've held in secrecy all their life, and they didn't even have a name for it. They didn't even have a way to conceptualize it. And now they've found this entire world of people who think like they do and who feel like they do, and who express their sexuality in similar ways. I think it's so important that we have a sense of community, of people that we can talk to about who we are and feel supported and educated about our sexuality.
And it's having that safe space to do that as well, isn't it? And if we feel educated and supported, then that allows us to kind of really express ourselves, so that we're able to, I guess, put words and a voice to some of the things that people have often held inside of themselves for years, for fear of not being normal. We know there's no such thing. And of course, that fear of not being normal actually means that the fear of being shamed or ridiculed or outcast from the community in which they were in. So the internet, as much as it's got lots of misinformation on there, also provides a great safe space to connect with people that are like-minded, and to find the right information, and to get those kinds of understandings, and to do that sometimes without even having to go anywhere, so that people can do that without having to go and ask the librarian for the book that they're after. They can order it off Amazon, for example, or just be able to do those searches without having to say anything to anybody at first, which is a wonderful thing, isn't it? To be able to find these things. What do you think to the flip side of that there is misinformation on the internet that can cause problems too? Do you think that is as big a problem as people not being able to find their sexual integrity, or do you think it kind of, in the balance, it weighs stuff up properly?
Well, we're seeking, when we're looking on the internet, we're seeking something that feels right to us. And sometimes, that's why I talk about my title of my book, Sexual Integrity, that there are other people who write about it, and they take a very different approach to it. They have a very different definition of integrity. And I think that on the internet, what we can see is a lot of myth. It's what I coach people about pornography, that pornography is not, it's staged. We're looking at actors. Sometimes we are looking at special effects and enhancements that are not real. And And unfortunately, here in the States, we don't allow for sex education in our public schools. And even a lot of our universities don't have comprehensive sex education courses. And so the internet, pornography may be people's only resource. So again, in sessions, I try to help them find some balance for that we understand the difference between myth and fact, and that we really kind of lean into who we are individually, not just what we think everybody else in the world is doing, or that we should be able to do it the way that person does. And, it's part of my education with clients is how you find evidence-based information about sexuality. So, there are lots of really good books out there, and there's some bad ones. Yours, by the way, is a very good one, and it is on my shelf, and I'm already talking to my female and some of my male clients about it, recommending it. But that was another reason that I wrote this book, because people come in and they say, is there a book you could suggest? And my own clients read my book, and then they come back into sessions and say, well, on this page, you talked about this, and I never thought of it that way before. So let me tell you what I'm thinking about it now that I've read it.
Well, one of the things that really struck me about your book, Stephen, is that there's lots of quotes in here from your clients that I'm sure as people kind of read through it, they will really kind of resonate, and they'll do the, oh my goodness, yes, that was me, or that is me, or that was, that kind of, it kind of speaks to them, if you like, right the way through from, I know there was an example in here of a woman who had been brought up to believe that sex was really for her husband, and magically thought, the night that she was married, that she would wake up the next day, or even that night, the ring on the finger, and suddenly this switch would go on inside of her. I think there was another one of a young teenage boy who had been kind of punished for masturbation, and was trying to let go of this horrible sinful thing that he'd been doing, and and all kinds of other stuff. And that was something that really kind of struck me, is that people will probably start reading this, and then and think, oh yes, and then start to understand that sexual integrity isn't something, it's individual, isn't it, for every single person on the planet. It's not something that is, we're not going to go on the internet and find 8 ways to know if you've got sexual integrity or not. It's about what that means for each person. What kinds of common themes do you find when people are on that journey towards their sexual integrity? As we've already said, it's something that's a continual thing, but when they're doing that in a positive way, and they're in a, what they're growing, if you like, and they're heading towards being in that good place, or they're in that kind of good place, what are the things that are kind of the signs, if you like, that somebody is in that good place rather than in the bad place that they were, if you like?
Well, most definitely that they are getting in integrity with their partner, that whatever has been hidden, lied about, kept in secrecy is now coming out, and they are sharing with their partner aspects of themselves that they haven't shared previously. And that does not always have a beautiful outcome. Sometimes are held in secrecy because that's what you have to do to keep the relationship intact. And when people get honest, not just about sex, but about a lot of things, relationships end. So that would be the first sign, that whoever is closest to you in your life, you're beginning to tell them the truth. And once that happens, it seems to really free people up to get more honest everywhere else in their life, because it is that primary relationship often we are so afraid of losing. And when people keep secrets from their partners, it's not because they're bad people. It's because they don't want to hurt the other person, or they don't want to lose the relationship. They don't want to leave. They don't want to be left. So that, I think, is the biggest hurdle. And once people jump that, the rest of it seems to kind of fall in place.
And it's such a huge thing, isn't it? You know, so we're back to, really, isn't it? It's about that kind of honesty. You know, it's being able to be honest, isn't it? And not to have to hide anything away, so that they can do that. And like you say, sometimes that means a relationship might end, but obviously sometimes it means that the relationship actually finally becomes the relationship that perhaps that person has always dreamed of. You know, it tends to, the one thing that never happens with that is that it stays the same. You know, there's usually some kind of shift, isn't there, when people start speaking their truth. And I guess within a relationship as well, it's about everybody speaking their truth rather than just one person. You know, often everybody needs to kind of find that kind of authenticity towards their intimate lives, I guess, isn't it?
Yes, and very sadly, a lot of couples fall into relationships with each other. They connect on many levels, but not a sexual level. They come to sex therapy hoping that the therapist can help them connect, can move them to that spot of normal that they've identified, and make them be sexually compatible. And some couples are just very different in how they're wired, what they enjoy, what is arousing for them, what's pleasurable for them. And they're not going to be able to be sexually compatible in their relationship because they are so vastly different as sexual beings. I think that's the damage of not providing sex education early in life. As our sexuality is developing and we're really kind of coming into adolescence and practicing relationships and dating, is that we coach people that there's one way to do it. And there's a lot of different ways to have a relationship and to have sexual expression. And so it is sad when couples discover that we're not compatible in this way. We might be great co-parents. We might have a lot of fun together. We might really love each other, but sexually, we're not able to connect.
And it's such a huge thing because people are often led to believe, aren't they, that there is just this one, you know, there's just this one way of having sex. And, you know, if they can just somehow get on the same wavelength, that, you know, everything will be fine. And sometimes, you know, that the wavelengths are so, you know, they clash more than kind of get to, you know, then harmonize with each other. Sometimes we can harmonize with somebody, can't we? And we find those places, but often it's a huge clash. And we don't, you know, often then it's dismissed as not being important because it's only sex. And actually it's a huge thing. It is a big part of a relationship. And if that's not there, and I always say to my clients, it's never an issue for the person that doesn't want it. You know, so if you're the person on the opposite side of that, it's a huge thing, isn't it? You know?
Right. And that's where things start shutting down. That point where we say, well, it's just sex, so it's not important. I'm not going to bring this up to my partner anymore. I'm just going to pretend like I don't like that, or I don't need that, I don't want that, and go on with my life. And once we do that, that's where we begin in secrecy. Those parts of ourselves always find a way back to the surface. And so if you can't have that expression within the relationship, often it happens outside of the relationship. And then that leads to just more problems in the couple.
Absolutely. You know, it's such a driving force, our sexuality, isn't it? And sex itself. you know, I often say to people, sometimes it's a bit like food. You know, you might deny yourself food because, you know, for whatever reason, your partner doesn't want to eat anymore, but you would go and find a place to eat in secret, however that is, you know, and that could be a solo thing, or it could be, you know, be going and eating with somebody else or whatever it may be. But ultimately, we still need that food. And, you know, if the other person doesn't, that's fair enough. But, you know, as the person that does have that need for something, and it is a need, it's not necessarily a choice. You know, when people kind of shame people sometimes, you know, if the person has strayed outside of a marriage, they're often shamed for that, rather than actually people being able to take a step back and kind of go, what's happened here, you know, and see what's kind of going on, rather than somebody just did something to hurt somebody else. Because like you say, the secrecy is, you know, whatever your beliefs are about, you know, a person's beliefs are about monogamy and non-monogamy and all of that kind of stuff. Secrecy is nearly always there to protect the other person. It's so that they don't hurt somebody else, you
Yes.
know.
And I agree completely. Sexuality is very primal, it's innate, it's instinctive. I often compare it to eating as well, and our appetite for food. And with everything else in the world that is instinctive and innate, eating, sleeping, breathing, we give our partners permission to have an appetite at a time that we don't. Sex is the one thing, it's the one innate drive we have where we think our partner should only be in the mood when we're in the mood. And I sometimes say to clients that that's like saying to your partner, if I'm not thirsty, you can't have anything to drink. You have to wait until I'm thirsty before you can have water. And that really kind of drives home to people what a bizarre notion that is. And our appetite for sex does not always line up with our partner's appetite.
No, and you know, absolutely. You know, it's just we need to get rid of the shame in even speaking about these things, isn't it? So that we can have these frank conversations and be able to do that at a much younger level. You know, when we talk about sex ed, you know, and I look at, I know it's different, or it's different here in the UK than it is in the States. From what I'm told, we do have sex ed here, but you know, I just got the curriculum actually from my son's high school, and there's massive gaps in there. So there's a lot of the mechanics, there's a lot of all the awful things that could possibly happen with things like sexually transmitted diseases, you know, how to put a condom on. But, you know, what's missing in there is, you know, that how it can be pleasurable and why, and, you know, all the stuff that actually allows people to make good choices and to actually to see what those things are. You know, and we've got the whole consent thing as well, where, you know, they don't they're talking about consent far too late, when actually consent is something that should rumble through our lives, whether it's sexual or not. The ability to be able to say no is a huge thing, or enthusiastically yes with no shame when we're at a place where we want to be able to do that too. So it's you know, if we can have these conversations and people can give themselves permission to have their sexual integrity, that's part of the problem, isn't it? Is that often people feel that it's something that maybe they shouldn't have if it's not something that falls within, you know, what they seem to be the norm, which actually, you know, could be, you know, something that, as you say, is completely not real on the internet, or is something that's come down via you know, a religious group or a peer group or whatever it may be, rather than, you know, like we always say, people walk your own talk and sing to your own tune, and just be you and follow your dreams. And actually being your authentic sexual self is just as important as all of those things, isn't it? You know.
Yes, and being ourself is, it sounds really simple to say that, but it's one of the most difficult things to do because we fear rejection. We want to be liked, we want to be loved, we want to be accepted, we want to be thought of as good people. And so that causes us to hide so many aspects of who we are that if we just own it and lean into it, it'll give us a lot of confidence and it will attract the right people to us. When we're not authentic, when we're not living in integrity, we are presenting to the world a facade, and we are attracting people to us who are not going to be able to love us as we are.
Absolutely.
That's why it's so important that we find our community of like-minded people and just accept ourselves and be accepted by others who understand us and can love us as we are.
So tell us, Stephen, where can we find this book? It's available on...
Well, it's available on Amazon. Also, it's available on Barnes and Noble. I Google the title periodically just to see where else is it showing up. So it's available on several other book sites that I'm not even familiar with. It has wide distribution. You can also request that your library order it if they don't have it already. It's available in paperback or ebook.
Fantastic. And where can we find out more about you? If people are looking to find their sexual integrity and they look at you and think, wow, what an amazing guy, and why wouldn't they? I'd love to work with him. How would they get hold of you?
I have a couple of different websites, sexualintegritycoach.com and also drstephendavidson.com, and that's STEVEN. Those are my two websites. You can also find me on Facebook under Sexual Integrity Coach. The Sexual Integrity Coach is my registered trademark. So for many years, people have referred to me as the Sexual Integrity Coach. So I have owned it and had it trademarked.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations on that. It's definitely you are the guy for that. So it's great that you've got that trademark. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your very busy day to talk to us about it really is just such a great book. There's so few books, I know we were kind of speaking about this before, that are really about kind of demystifying a lot of stuff and helping people kind of let go of the shame that they have, which is really about being themselves, around their sexuality. And, I'm sure that this will be a book that, as we move forwards, that will be a real turning point for many, many people when they realize that they can give themselves permission to simply be themselves sexually, which is a massive, massive thing. So I know as a therapist, this is a firm favorite and will be recommended to many, many of my clients now. So thank you so, so much for writing it, Stephen. It's truly a wonderful book. And if you want to find out more, if you don't want to miss any other content from Trancing in the Sheets, now is the time to like this video, comment on it. If you've got questions for Stephen or you've got any comments about sexual integrity, please drop them in the comments below and I will make sure that he gets them. Don't forget to subscribe, and then you get all the new content from Trancing in the Sheets. And thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to us today, and we'll see you next time.
Now's the time to like this video, subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell to be kept up to date with all the latest content from Trancing in the Sheets. My book, Woman, How to Find, Understand and Embrace Your Sexual Pleasure, is now available from all good bookstores. Visit KazRileyWoman.com for lots of amazing, great free resources to help you along your journey.